Hi, and welcome to another episode. In today's episode, I stay in a dark office and tell you about what the ink types there are and which one's right for you. Today's 25th of December, and I've just got into the office to measure some things and obviously to make this video, and as soon as I come in, pop the lights on, the whole town, we're in Omskirk, in middle of nowhere, the electricity goes out, and basically that's my life currently. Anyway, proceeding with the inks. As you know, there is a confusing amount of the printing technologies, and while we were trying to establish what products we would like to do, we encountered a very big issue where nobody seemingly explains what the inks are, what they do, what's the difference, what's the machinery for them, and what's the maybe costs, maybe some advantages and disadvantages to each type of the inks used within the industries. Let me start with the most simple one. Well, in terms of usability and the products that it can manufacture, I will skip the dot matrix printers for the reasons being most probably nobody's going to manufacture anything on them, and you can encounter them in banks, and the most distinguishable thing about them is you will see actually dots on your receipt, and receipt specifically, because most often than not you will encounter them in banks, let's say, or cash deals, the older ones. Right, the newer ones are the thermal label printers. The way they work is they will print on the thermal paper. It does not use any inks. It usually is of a very low quality, so DPIs, your resolution and stuff, it will be very low. It starts most often than not, in 99% of the time, it will start as a white piece of paper, and the way you print anything on it is with the use of thermal printer. And when the printer will obviously heat up, it will have a string, so to say, if you will, very simplified terms. It will darken the areas, and that's how you get your text and stuff like that. This is how your most shipping labels are made, and it's very cost effective, but obviously the downsides of that are the very low output quality, and as such there's not too many usages for it. Laser printers. Let's speak for a second for laser printers. The laser printers work by dispensing a toner, a powder essentially, so they are not liquid. The laser printers will not be liquid, well, in terms of having cartridges and stuff, but the laser printers is what you will most often have your labels, leaflets, brochures, cards, business cards printed on. The reason being for that is I'll have to make a little division. There is digital printers, as in laser printers as well, but they are more massive. They are designed to use pretty much the same toner but different technology that allows that to be more cost effective. But other than that, there is not too many differences besides the capabilities of the machines themselves. So this is where the laser printers start off. They are expensive, as in very expensive. Well, I mean, your typical home printer would be most probably black and white. Well, it doesn't print it in black only, but even if you get a color one, it will be expensive, and the cost of the cartridges that will not last long if you print something like this with full coverage especially, they will most often cost roughly the same price as the new printer itself, maybe like a 10%, 15% cheaper than a brand new machine itself. That's how the whole industry works. But the advantages of them laser printers is you can print on paper. That will not perish as easily as your typical ink printers that, well, I will speak before them in just a second. But the prints will be UV proof, and they will be obviously the wear proof. They are quite durable, so this is why a laser printers are good for printing. Obviously, that is if the label printers, sorry, the laser printers are, where I was going with that. So this is why the laser printers will be most often used for distribution media and other things. The quite distinguishable characteristic, if you will, or how do you know the laser printer? Besides, if you don't know, look at it straight away, you can distinguish most of the prints out there and the technology by having a magnifying glass. This cost me under a tenner, and if you look under the magnifying glass, you will see a quite distinguishable pattern that is made using the laser printers. That will, if you see that kind of pattern, it doesn't matter what type of printer, like a size it was. If you see this pattern, most often than not, you will be looking at a laser printer. So even if you see humongous billboards with something written on them besides shops, let's say, most often than not, they will be made on a laser printers. The inkjets, most probably the ones you have at home or seen in the random office, they would be using either dye-based inks, aqueous inks, water-based inks, or pigment inks. In more rare cases, it would be sublimation ink. So let's dive into this. On them alone, dye-based inks give out a superior quality print. On regardless of which, unless your printer is like 20 years old, the dye-based inks will give out the, well, one of the best results that you can achieve using printers. This is why so many people love them, especially if we take into consideration that dye-based inks are one of the cheaper types of inks. Being water-based, I do believe, is the driving cost for them that drives the price down. However, while they print so good, while they cost so less or so not much, the main disadvantage of them, the two main disadvantages of them, would be that, first of all, the dye-based inks will suffer drastically if they are exposed to sunlight, the UV so-called. The inks will bleed out, sorry, not bleed out, bleach out. So they will wash out, and your, obviously over time, your design or logo, whatever it is that's printed, will become discolored. And that's one of the disadvantages of the dye-based inks. The other disadvantage of them is that unless your media that you're using is not specifically designed to withstand water splashes, any liquid interference, your inks will bleed. So on this plain matte paper, if I would to be submerging this into liquid or getting this in contact with liquid, the inks will run off the paper. That is, unless you've got a paper type that's specifically designed to absorb the ink, and not let it run off the media. That is, yes, this will protect it from the running inks problem. It will still not going to protect it against the discoloration or the UV. In order to overcome that problem, you would have to laminate your stickers. Pigment-based inks, they are a step up, if you will, from the dye-based inks. They are used within the same machines. If your media that you're using is water resistant, like in this case, the pigment inks will not be absorbed into this type of media, so they will be easily wiped off. And that's a problem for some, but it could be not a problem for others. The main usage for that type of technology could be a long-lasting pictures, obviously on matte surface most probably, because not all glossy surfaces will actually absorb the pigment. But it is more expensive ink, and it comes with a couple of perks. The pigment ink will still dissolve and run when exposed to liquids. However, it will not discolorate once it's been exposed to UV light, sunlight, for a prolonged period of time. So this has some advantages. So you could most probably print something like this using the pigment inks of your printer, the one at home, the inkjet one. However, it most probably would not be economically viable, because that would prove to be a very expensive thing to do. Why would you choose one type out of the other? Well, the reason is fairly simple. If you're printing, let's say this would be a menu or an ad for that, a very low quantity, or you're starting out, it can prove to be useful printing that, or photography prints, for example. It could prove useful to use that instead of the dye-based things that will discolor quite quickly and lose the quality, obviously. But again, the costs are at least 2 times higher for the inks themselves, and you would most probably have to resort to using third-party ink manufacturers, because by default the printers will use whatever the manufacturer says they use, and it's not like you can go to a shop and say, I've got Epson L555 or whatever, and I don't want dye-based inks, or vice versa, I want the other type. That's not how it works. The printer will only use whatever the manufacturer said you would be using. So therefore, if you want to use a different type of ink, although it is supported, you would have to, well, not technically supported by the manufacturer, but technically it can be used. So you would have to explore your options with third-party ink manufacturers and find the one that will work with your machinery. Now to the last ink types that we'll discuss with the inkjets. Of course, that's the sublimation inks. The sublimation inks will allow you to, on a dark mug, they will allow you to transfer your image, the printed image, onto either a garment, a piece of ceramics, a mug, a tile, for example, and as such decorate these type of things. By substance itself, the sublimation inks are similar to pigment inks, and therefore are pretty much interchangeable. Not interchangeable, but you could use these type of inks within the inkjets. Obviously, there's not too much choice. If you've got a printer and you want to make it print in different inks, that's not going to work. In order to use a different type of ink, you will have to use a different machine. The machine that did not have any other ink within it from the very beginning. But that aside, the inks themselves are even more expensive. They are not used to print any paper type stuff at all. Stickers, flyers, booklets, books, whatever, you name it, it's not used for that. Its sole purpose is to be printed onto transfer paper as an something in between, or a temporary placeholder. There we go, I'll use that. A temporary placeholder that will be put against a type of final product that once gone through the processing is removed, and you are left with the final product and an image on that. And that's pretty much all use there is to sublimation inks. 2 words on obviously how to know which type of printing was used on a product that you are looking at. The ink printers, inkjets, will have a noticeably different pattern from a laser printers, regardless of what inks they use. All of the 3 types that I've mentioned, they all will look roughly the same under the microscope, because they are printing in pattern sort of way, and you can easily distinguish them from everything else. After the next set of inks, which will be eco-solvent, and I'll show solvent under eco-solvent as well, UV and latex inks. Now these types of inks are typically used not at home, because the machinery is so big. Well, I'll show you an example. And they are typically used to manufacture something big, i.e. think banners, advertisement, billboards and stuff like that, the ones that do not use paper, although it could be used for paper as well. But that's how you usually, or that's where you usually will find your eco-solvent inks, latex inks and UV inks. The main benefit of using them inks is obviously the cost, and the way they're used is obviously on a big scale, and using your regular inks or even the aqueous inks or pigment inks, or even toner in some cases, is not cost effective. Therefore, this technology was developed that allows you to print humongous sizes of printouts, and they will sustain the harsh environment, which is the outdoors, whether it be rain, depending on the ink type. So UV inks, eco-solvent inks, latex inks, they have more or less durability against brushing or wearing out, although all of them will most often than not require some protection in the form of laminating. Obviously that's not applicable to banners, so banners will just be plain naked eco-solvent inks or UV inks or latex inks. And the advantages and disadvantages are, I would say, down to what you're using, how are you using it, and so on. Because if you're just making a banner, then I'd say there's not too much difference which inks to use. If you're thinking of stickers, and your stickers need to be laminated, so let's say a shop front, right, a big window sticker, then if you're using eco-solvent inks, you will have to let them degas for at least 24 hours before you will apply the transfer tape, sorry, not the transfer tape, the overlaminate the stickers, so there's no further inconsistencies and bubbles and whatnot with them, where that is not present on UV inks, because they are cured while they're printing. So pretty much the print head is spraying the inks, and on the other side of the print head there's a UV light that goes after it and pretty much just dries them. So there's no degassing period. You pretty much just get out of the machine a ready to go media that you can over laminate straight away and use it pretty much as fast as you possibly can with the after processing machinery and stuff like that. Therefore, that is the most common way. And obviously if you're using stickers, they can be used to produce stickers as well, such as these, printing on the obviously digital vinyl, and you would have to use, they are very limited in color spectrum, so to say, and the CMYK is not the most capable thing within this technology, unfortunately. It still does quite good with base tone solid colors, but obviously if you need lighter colors, the prints will become grainy due to the nature of the technology itself. 2 words on the manufacturers of the printers. If we speak of laser printers, obviously there's known brands as Samsung, HP, this Canon D printers, but most notably Xerox, Oki, the Konica Minolta, and so on and so on. They will all depend, choosing between them will all depend on what's the purpose of your printer. And obviously there's not too much difference between the machinery. Yes, some will be cheaper to run, some will be more expensive to run, and I'd say that's the most what it comes down to. Like Lexmark, for example, is mostly used in the bigger shops like Tesco's and Morrison's and so on, and they use black and white Lexmark printers, large printers, well, large compared to your home printer, obviously. But if we speak to inkjet printers, there is only, as far as I know, for smaller type of printers, there's only 2 technologies on the market as a whole. One is belonging to Epson and one belongs to Canon. The HP, for example, is leasing the technology from Canon, so their printers will be based on the same technology, and Brother, for example, is leasing the technology from Epson, so their print technology will be similar as well. The main 2 differences between these 2 inkjet printing technologies is that Epson is using piezoelectric printheads, which means the droplet will be squeezed out of the printhead. When the electric pulse is applied, there is a membrane that will move, physically change the volume of the where the ink is stored within the printhead. If that's very simplified terms. And when the membrane contracts or expands, if you will, the pressure changes and that squeezes out the droplet. It falls onto the paper and bobs your uncle. With the Canon technology, it's slightly different. They use heat. They will boil the ink within the machine, within the printhead, and the vapor, or yeah, I guess it's vapor. The vapor will, well, due to the temperature and expansion itself, the vapor will leave the printhead and it will get onto the media that you're using. As of such, some inks are more universal than others, and this goes more onto third-party manufacturers. So if you see that something is so universal that it's used for both Epson and Canon, that's a big no-no straight away. Or if it's used for HP and Brother, that's a big no-no, because these 2 manufacturing types, these 2 printing technologies have to be separated, and you cannot use the same print inks in the machines interchangeably. In some cases you might use more inks in more different machines, because obviously the Epson is still, for example, manufacturing cartridges for the machine that has been released maybe not 15 but 10 years ago. Let's say you can still find the cartridges, and obviously they wouldn't be storing 3 million different types of inks within their storages. Obviously it's one big tanker, more or less, that's being used for the same inks, or at least they are backwards compatible, so they are based on the same technology, but they cannot be interchanged with different type of technology. So hopefully that makes it at least a bit more clearer on what technology types there are present, which technology type are used for what, and it seems it looks like the light has came back on. It did. Yay! So yeah, basically, hopefully this makes it a bit clearer, and hopefully now you will have a better understanding of what technology you will have to pursue in order to fulfill the product that you are thinking of manufacturing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next episode.